Hello, everyone. In the first two parts, we kind of theorized on whether or not we can know if when Jesus will return, and it's my belief based on Scripture that we definitely can know the general time frame, and we're also encouraged to watch. And then we looked at a couple of broader time anchors and time markers that Bible prophecy gives to us, which seem to suggest that the start of the 7 year tribulation and right before Jesus' return um, could realistically start sometime between 2015 and 2045. Obviously, we're 10 years into that. And then we looked at the parable of the fig tree, which, based on some specific events, seemed to indicate the possibility that the 7 year tribulation could start this year or next year, or possibly out in 2044 or so. And so, what we're going to do in this part is look at some signs that the Bible says for us to look for, and just to see if we can discern what's more likely. Is it more likely it's going to be in the next year or so, or is it more likely that we still have a couple decades to go before he comes back? So, some of the signs of the end times. Let's start in Matthew 24, verses 3 through 8, where it says, "As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. 'Tell us,' they said, 'when will this happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?' And Jesus answered, 'Watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed, as these things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these things are the beginning of birth pains.'" So here, Jesus just gives us some signs to look out for. The biggest one, I didn't include it here, but this is the first time. The first thing he says is just watch out that no one deceives you. But then, as he goes on in this discourse throughout Matthew 24, he says it two more times. So the main thing that he's trying to tell us is that there's going to be massive amounts of deception at the end, and it's going to be really, really difficult for us to discern what in the world is going on unless we are sound in Bible prophecy. Otherwise, we will have no idea. We will be completely fooled. So that's just something I really want to call out, because things are probably not as they seem. None of us really know exactly what's going on, but Jesus does tell us we really, really have to be really, really careful. Um, then wars and rumors of wars. So there's been wars, I mean, since the beginning of man's history. So it's just more like an increasing frequency and intensity of such things. Famines and earthquakes. So he mentions birth pain. So again, what we're looking for is not so much these events by themselves happening here and there. We are looking for a pattern where these types of events are increasing in frequency and increasing in intensity. Then we have in Daniel 9, verse 27, we have this covenant that's going to be confirmed or strengthened with most of the world in Israel. And it basically says then, he, which is most people believe is referring to the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. In the Bible, in this context, 1 week is thought of as 7 years. But in the middle of that week, or in the middle of the 7 years, which is equivalent to the 7 year tribulation period, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. So the covenant that we're looking for is probably going to be some kind of agreement between Israel and many other nations. And so we've got the Abraham Accords, we've got the Gaza peace plan, and we even have something called the Isaac Accords, which is like some Latin American countries are having a sort of this. So the Abraham Accords is largely between a lot of Middle Eastern countries and some European countries and Israel, and then the Isaac Accords are a similar like peace agreement, but between Latin American countries and Israel. And then the Gaza peace plan has been in the news lately, where the war in Gaza in June, and Hamas, etc., where we're trying Trump is trying to build a peace plan there. So the question is, are one or more of these covenants or agreements the covenant? My speculation is that it's probably going to be a combination of these, and maybe another one on top of that. But obviously, that remains to be seen. But that is something else to look for. Then we've got Joel chapter 3, verse 2. I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have also divided up my land. So here we're seeing that the Israelites are going to be scattered into many nations. That was the diaspora that happened a couple thousand years ago. And then now we have this dividing of the land. And so, technically Gaza, for example, is part of the original part of Israel. What I'm thinking here is that this covenant, whatever it is, might include something along the lines of a two-state solution or multi-state solution where the land around Israel is being divided up between Israel and other nations. And so there has been some language suggesting around these around these verses. For example, Ambassador Mike Waltz just recently wrote to President Trump about trying to get a peace agreement to move forward, and I think he was referring to Gaza specifically, and then maybe also more broadly in the Middle East in general. And he actually used the word covenant, that this resolution is not just a promise, but is a covenant. So I thought that was at least eyebrow raising. I mean, we'll see. And then Trump recently had Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, visit the White House. I think that was in late November. And, this is where MBS told Trump that he wants to join the Abraham Accords, but he's insistent upon, at a very minimum, a path to a Palestinian state, meaning dividing up Israel's land, a two-state solution or multi-state solution. So then we also have another verse, 1 Thessalonians 5, chapter 3, for when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as labor pains come upon a woman, and they shall not escape. And so where you've got all this talk of peace and a covenant and two-state solution or multi-state solution, dividing up God's land, within the midst of all that, you have talk of peace and safety. Now, the UN has been talking about peace and security, or peace and safety. The word safety from the Greek can also be translated as security. I mean, they've been talking about this for 20 years. It seems to be ramping up in the last few years. I think in 2022, in a 1 month time frame, the words peace and security were used specifically about Israel over 350 times. So we have all this talk. And what's interesting here is that what Paul points out here in 1 Thessalonians is that, this 7-year tribulation is going to be sudden. It's going to come almost without notice. The world is not going to see it coming. It'll be hopefully a pre-tribulation rapture event, which is going to be crazy by itself. And then probably shortly thereafter, we start this tribulation period. And so that's kind of the sobering part about this, is that it's going to come in the blink of an eye when it does come. And so we're seeing these signs start to build up. And this is why, at least for me, I'm trying to share this information for anyone who's interested, just to kind of think about it and maybe pray on it. So I have here, this might be a little bit difficult to see, but I'll try to run through this quickly, just sort of some key elements and signs to look for and how they may or may not fit with a rapture and tribulation in the coming year versus out in 2044, perhaps 2045. So we've got the possible start to the fig tree generation that we talked about in the last video, which fits both time periods. This 77 and 84 year typology and number patterns could fit both periods. We didn't talk about this, but there was a group of people called the Essenes who were a priestlyhood. They were descendants of the priestly line of Zadok, which was they were the priests during King David's time. They were just known to be the most accurate calendar keepers in the world, and some of their writings appeared in the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. and they claim that the last Jubilee period, a Jubilee period in the Bible is a 50-year period. A lot of God's prophecies kind of fall into 50-year blocks of periods. And according to these scenes, the last Jubilee is between 2000 period is between 2026 and 2075. And so both of these periods, kind of fit into that final Jubilee, the end of the age kind of thing. Then we have wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famine, etc., in various places. I have no statistical evidence to support this, but I do kind of feel like these things are accelerating a little bit here in the last 18 to 24 months. Um, and seeing them increase in intensity. We have no way of knowing what that may or may not look like in 2044 and 45. Um, then we've got the acceleration of artificial intelligence, which I think is going to be a key component of the Mark of the Beast system, which we'll talk about more here in a little bit. But this is about, there's going to be this sort of unified monetary system where you're going to have to pledge your allegiance to the Antichrist, which might be, he's not going to call himself the Antichrist. He'll probably call himself Jesus or a Messiah or whatever. You're going to have to pledge your worship of him in order to have access to the monetary system. And so AI is going to play a big role in that. We see AI accelerating. And so that fits 2025 and 26. I almost think it wouldn't fit 2044 and 2045 because it's accelerating so quickly that 20 years from now, if it keeps going at the same rate, it's just going to be so far beyond what's in Bible prophecy. And so that would be one maybe reason I would think that, this might come sooner rather than later. Foundations of the Daniel 9:27 covenant in place. Yeah, the foundations are there, and they certainly will be there 20 years from now. Exactly 2,000 years after Jesus' death and resurrection would be this year, next year, most likely. That would not fit 2044. And then never before seen super tetrad plus marriage signs in the stars. And so I'm not going to get into this in a whole lot of detail, but basically in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, it clearly mentions that God is going to use signs in the heavens, the sun, moon, and stars, to kind of tell his story and to, for signs for people to look for. And a super tetrad is something like 8 blood moons in a row. It's never happened before. It's going to happen over a period between 2043 and 44. And there's going to be some highly unusual sign in the stars that in the constellation of Leo, where Leo is like the lion, like Jesus Christ, and then the bride is right at the heart of Leo, and so that will happen in 2043 and 44. So that is somewhat interesting. I just want to summarize or some of these signs or talk about them a little bit more, but this is getting a little bit long. So let me stop here, and then we'll finish this up in the next one. Thank you so much, and God bless you.